This is Legacy Battle. Make sure you hit like, subscribe, and that notification button. I'm Michael Adams, creator of Legacy Battle. My panelists tonight, they're all from the Gridiron Battle Zone. Brian King, Peggy Holmes, Reynald Gresham. Our special guest tonight, we're joined by a former quarterback with the Atlanta Falcons. After playing, he became a coach several places. Teams notable, the University of Hawaii. He was there from 99 to 2007, and SMU from 08 to 2014. As an NFL coach, he was with the Oilers, the Lions, Falcons, Chargers. He's currently the offensive coordinator for the Seattle Sea Dragons of the XFL. And he's got numerous Coach of the Year honors that he has won throughout his vast career. So we have Coach June Jones here. June, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Look forward to talking.
Excellent. As always, we're going to have a Q&A after for Coach about his career. Tonight's debate will be the greatest wide receiver corps of all time. So we're talking trios here tonight. Honorary mention to the Colts when they had Marvin Harrison, Reggie Wayne, and Brandon Stokely. So that's our honorary mentions tonight. We're going to start out, though, with the greatest show on turf.
All right, I've got that greatest show on turf, the Rams. So we're talking about Isaac Bruce, Zahir Hakeem, and Torrey Holt. Bruce, he came on the scene in 1994. He didn't really have great speed, 4.55 time, and he wasn't really too big, 6 foot tall, only 188 pounds. But man, he made up for it with this smooth and surgical-like route running. His clutch catches too. None was more clutch than in Super Bowl 34 when he slowed down to catch a pass over his shoulder, outmaneuvered the Titans DB, and took it 73 yards to the house. That turned out to be the game winner. Bruce made plenty of big catches throughout the playoffs as well. Hakeem, he wasn't real big either. 5'10", 189 pounds. He was with the Rams from 1998 to 2001. He was very quick, and he did a really great job sitting down in the slot. He was good for about 40 catches per year, about 500 yards, and he scored 16 TDs while he was in St. Louis. And now we come to my favorite, Torrey Holt. This guy was 6 foot tall, 200 pounds, and lightning fast. 4.34 time. He used his speed, yes, but he also crafted himself into a very, very good route runner, and he rarely dropped the ball. I'm not sure why he isn't in the Hall of Fame yet, but he absolutely should be. So when these three guys were together from 1999 to 2001, the Rams went to 2 Super Bowls, winning 1. They had the number 1 scoring offense all 3 years. They were number 1 in passing yards all 3 years as well. And we all know the Kurt Warner story. This wide receiver group helped elevate a stock boy to Super Bowl MVP. So what a talented, amazing group this was.
Coach, your thoughts on these three and the greatest show on turf that kind of revolutionized offense for a while there in the NFL?
Yeah, well, they kind of catapulted off what we were doing in the NFL with nobody was running 3 and 4 and 5 wide receivers back then. But after we had pretty much had success both at the Oilers and Atlanta, a lot of teams started to spread the field. And the one guy that I think is clearly the best, and had watched him play so many times was Isaac Bruce, and he was really one of the greatest route runners and smoothest, and he didn't probably time as fast, but he was as fast. He played within the 30-yard area as fast as anybody in the league, and had just great concentration on the football.
And how much do you think Marshall Faulk contributed to those three being as good as they are?
Well, I think that he helped Marshall Faulk because they helped Marshall Faulk because they spread the field. They got everybody out of the box. Now, Marshall Faulk is a Hall of Famer as well, and he had great numbers those years playing in the spread formations. But it was just everybody had their greatest years. It seemed like that for the Rams. You could say the quarterback did, the running back did, and he had success at a couple different places. But he was truly his best with the Rams.
Well, let's move on to the posse.
All right. And the posse, to me, was the culmination of Joe Gibbs' dream of recreating Air Coryell in Washington. He had already built a top offensive line and a run game that people feared, and he wanted to play off of that. And I think that's exactly what Gibbs did in creating the posse. The posse actually came together in 1986. This was really 6 years after Monk got in and 3 years after they got Clark. What we're talking about here are three guys that were excellent route runners, smart guys, guys who could run block, guys who understood the game at the level of coaching. And there's stories that Gibbs tells about his collaboration with them. When Sanders joined Clark and Monk in 86, there was no problem, and the trio bonded easily. Each wide receiver brought a different skill set. We know that Monk was more of a possession type, prolific possession type wide receiver, while Clark excelled in the middle and, of course, with Yak. But due to Clark's cumulative injuries, Joe Gibbs said, we got to stretch this field. And in Sanders, he found that guy that would not only make the offense more productive, but give him more play calling options. And let me say this, the posse was not only known for their speed, they were just good football players, solid guys. They didn't do a spread. They didn't do anything fancy. Gibbs never did it that way. They absorbed Gibbs' playbook and even suggested new ways. Gibbs said that they added dimensions to his offense that he never even dreamed of. The results were record-breaking. Okay. By 1989, this new offense was perfected, and the Redskins produced 3 1,000-yard receivers, first time in NFL history. And we do see other productive trios, but they just aren't the professionals. They didn't have the varied skill sets and the smarts that he had. Just a sprinkling of the numbers. Ricky Sanders, of course, who's best remembered for his catch of a Ronald Reagan pass on the White House South Lawn. He's second all time in Super Bowl receptions, 483 receptions, 6,477 yards, and 37 touchdowns. Clark, same story, consistency, 699 receptions, 10,856 yards, and 65 touchdowns. And Brian, BK, just like Holt, a lot of people think Gary needs to be in the Hall of Fame as well. We've got Pro Bowl honors 4 times for Gary Clark. Then we go finally to the Hall of Famer Monk, 16-year career, 940 receptions, 12,721 yards, and 68 touchdowns. And of course, we all remember Monk leading the league in 1984. What the posse brought was stability, and it really allowed Joe Gibbs and his system to realize their next level.
So, Coach, how impressive are these guys considering I'm looking at this list now? They didn't do it under one quarterback. Humphreys, Rippon, Williams, Schrader. It didn't matter who was throwing the ball. They still put up numbers.
Well, I think that aligns with what Peggy said there, that the system was superior. And Joe, it's funny. I just talking through this, it's triggering a lot of things back. 1984, Mouse Davis and I were at the Houston Gamblers, and we had Ricky Sanders, and I can remember Joe really interested in what we were doing offensively, because he was like a pounded guy, basically. Even though he came from Coryell's system, he wanted to run the football. And when we had Ricky, I can remember spending time with Joe, talking about through the spread formation, some of those different things. And of course, they signed Ricky, and then the rest was history. That was an amazing group of receivers. Like you said, they were very intelligent. They played the game, and they knew what was expected of them within the confines of the offense. They weren't me guys; they were we guys, and that's what I think says it all about Joe Gibbs. He was a team guy and did it with all those quarterbacks, and I was coaching against him for the later part of those years when we were at the Oilers, and then we played the Redskins in the playoffs after Joe had left, but it was still the same system. They carried it on.
All three of them very good. Monk's in the Hall of Fame. I thought Clark was going to go there one day, but it never matriculated. But let's move on to let's move on to the '80s Dolphins.
The '80s Dolphins. First, I want to start off. It all started with Nat Moore. Okay, Nat Moore, wide receiver / running back. For a career total, he had 510 receptions for 7,546 yards and 74 touchdowns. 1 Pro Bowl, 1 All-Pro. The funny thing about that was all of them were really records. He pretty much set all the records for the Dolphins receiving wise because he was the man for both quarterbacks. Let's just say he was immortalized for his helicopter catch that he made against the Jets at the Giant Stadium in 1984. I mean, we probably all seen it. The catch. I mean, it was crucial because it led to a score for a come-behind win in a closely contested divisional game. But let's just say, in 1986, when he retired, he had every receiving record. I just go down some stats. In 83, he had 39 catches for 573 yards and 6 touchdowns. 43 catches. In 84, he had 43 catches for 576 yards and 6 touchdowns. And, you know, it go on and on. All that was good until we got Clayton and Duper, or a lot of people, that trio, that duo that the Dolphins got. The funny thing about Mark Clayton, he was drafted in the 8th round, 223 overall, 223rd overall.
Yeah.
Okay. His career statistics: 582 receptions, 898,974 yards, and 84 touchdowns, and 5 Pro Bowls. Not in the Hall of Fame. At that time, he had, from 1984 to 1993, he had 5 1,000-yard seasons. He also had set the record for 18 touchdowns in 1984, which was a record until it was broke by some receiver, we'll say, some guy named Jerry Rice, before he finally broke the record. That's how long it stood. In that season, in 1984, he had 73 receptions for 1,389 yards and 18 touchdowns. I mean, we're talking about a guy that just produced over and over, year after year after year. Then we can turn around and go to Mark Duper. His career statistics: 511 receptions, 8,869 yards, 59 touchdowns, and 3 Super Bowls. This guy right here, first team All-Pro in 1984, second team All-Pro in 1983, and in 1990, he was the second Dolphin to pass 7,000 career reception yards. I mean, you just look at a guy that just produced over and over. He's still not in the Hall of Fame. I'll just give you some stats. In 1986, 67 receptions for 1,313 yards and 11 touchdowns. 1994, 71 reception, 1,306 yards and 8 TDs. I mean, just produced over and over and over. But the thing that's holding him back is some guy, I think Brian might know him, some guy named Marino. Some guy named Marino that's they pretty much given, you know, and duly noted, Dan earned everything. I'm not saying he didn't, but that's the biggest drawback I got, because they're saying that if Marino wasn't there, they wouldn't have put up the stats they did. But, you know, to me, that runs hand in hand. Marino was there throwing them passes, but they needed the guys there to catch it. So, I mean, we're talking about guys that just, if they were playing nowadays, could you imagine the yards they would be putting up in the pass-happy NFL that we have nowadays? I mean, it's just mind-boggling that they was putting up these stats in the 80s when the pass wasn't really that big. In the 80s and the 90s, I mean, it wasn't really that big. You didn't hear about a quarterback passing for 5,000 yards or 4,000 yards. That's just something that nobody really believed, couldn't understand back in the day. But Marino and Clayton and Duper and Moore, I mean, that was a trio to me.
So, Coach, a great question then. What do you think they could have done without Marino? And when they did do this, it was a straight up running league. So they were at a, kind of a little advantage to be the first to fling the ball around like they were.
Yeah, well, I think they would have been successful, and like was said right there, in this day and age, they did it when they could tackle the receivers, they hold them, they double hit them. And can you imagine the numbers they would have now if they were in the rules the way they were now? Not just that they're throwing the ball, but the change of the offenses. I mean, the change of the officiating to the offenses. And I think I think Nat Moore. I'll never forget when Don Shula split him out on the 46 defense. That Buddy Ryan defense is undefeated, and that ended Buddy Ryan's career to me when they figured out that if they split out in 3 and 4 wide receivers, guess what? They had linebackers covering wideouts, and that ended the scheme basically. Although Buddy Ryan's scheme is still part of a lot of a small part of every defense and that is called right now, but it ended it for playing it the whole game.
Yeah.
Duper and Clayton, as Reynolds said, yeah, I think they were borderline Hall of Fame. They had a shot at getting in there, but neither has. So maybe this one day, who knows, with the Veterans Committee, we'll know.
Yeah, who knows? It's such a political thing now.
Yeah.
But I think they did more to change the game of football than any other threesome, even more so than Gibbs. I think Gibbs probably copied off of a little bit of what Shula did in '85 against those Bears.
Well, let's move on to our final one tonight. That's going to be 3 Deep. That's their nickname, the Minnesota Vikings. So I'm gonna keep this relatively short here. These guys were only together for a short time period from 98 to 01. And I'm only looking at what they did during the time period that they were together. But you start with Randy Moss. He's the greatest deep threat in NFL history. Somebody proved me wrong on that one. He could stretch a defensive line like no other. Then you got Chris Carter. I have him at number 3 as the greatest actual catching wide receiver behind Rice and Fitzgerald. He had hands. He didn't drop the ball very often. And then Jake Reed. I mean, he might be a step below those two, but he still was a very solid wide receiver in his own right. Prior to Moss arriving, he had 4 1,000-yard seasons, and him and Carter, they set the receptions record with 207 one season together before Randy Moss showed up. So he showed what he can do, and then he was kind of like the nice third wide receiver there when they became the trio. But a lot like Peggy's wide receivers, they dealt with quite a few quarterbacks as well. It was Brad Johnson, Randall Cunningham, Jeff George, and then they finished out with Dante Culpepper. And then there were a few other guys that got a few starts in there that really aren't even worth mentioning. But I like them, and I think if I'm trying to separate them from the other groups that we're talking about tonight to prove that they're the best, I did some math here, and I took the best 3 years of all the trios that we have tonight. So the Vikings trio during their best 3 years together put up 8,800 yards and 83 touchdowns. The closest that comes to that trio-wise tonight is Duper, Clayton, and Moore at 7,400. So over 1,400 yards less and 74 touchdowns. So 9 touchdowns less. The Rams weren't even in the ballpark. They were only at 6,767 touchdowns. And Washington was right around there as well. So if we're looking just as they were actually a trio, these 3 put up the biggest numbers during the best 3 years of their career. So, Coach, how do you cover a guy like Randy Moss between the speed and the leaping ability, and then Chris Carter and Jake Reed? What's your thoughts on this trio?
Well, I always liked him. I remember Chris Carter making a catch against us in Atlanta. That was the most unbelievable catch that I have ever watched, and you know that I've watched a lot of passes and catches over my career. I think I think Chris Carter. I mean, well, to be quite honest, Randy Moss benefited from going to Minnesota because Jake Reed and Chris Carter were pure wide receivers. And Randy Moss had his best seasons to me with Minnesota. And, he had a lot of other times, a lot of other opportunities, but those years in Minnesota, I think, benefited him personally as well as professionally. Teaching him how to play. And they were, like you said, you named the quarterback. They still were successful and still productive. I think there's a reason that they're number one on those numbers. They were really, really special.
So we're gonna move into our vote tonight. Cannot pick your own. Brian, you're in my corner. Who are you taking?
Man, this is tough, man. These guys all had some great cases, and these are great wide receiver groups.
Yeah.
To me, I think the one that just has the most pure talent, and then like you said, was able to resurrect the career of Cunningham, and I got to go with those Vikings. I mean, those Vikings were something else. They really were.
And I gotta go with the Dolphins. I think they're the originators of big time passing games. So, and as much as I love the greatest show on turf, Brian, you know that I represented, I think it was Falk or no, greatest offense of all time. I represented the greatest show on turf. So I love them, but I got to give it to Marino and the Dolphins. Peggy.
Thanks for reminding me, Renaud, how great that Shula offense really was. And I've got to go with them. I keep forgetting the consistency of the offensive systems that they had and just sheer productiveness down there. I got to go with the Dolphins.
Reynald?
Huge Falk fan. Greatest show on turf. I mean, what them guys were doing, I mean, it was just mind-boggling. It was just like they said, just like backyard football. You just chuck it up and they come down, and the guys, they just did everything. I mean, the Rams, they had my vote. I mean, just wow.
And Coach, who would you take?
Well, I'd take them all. But I think I agree. I think the Miami group probably would have fit what we do the best of all those. Although I would have figured out to integrate every one of those groups, the Redskin group, the Minnesota receivers, were fantastic Hall of Fame type players. But I'll go back to when it first got going, and that was with the Dolphins.
So a win on Legacy Battle's greatest wide receiver trios of all time goes to the Miami Dolphins. Reynald, congratulations on your first win on the show. You get first question for our guest, and then we'll go Brian, Peggy, me.
Thank you. Coach, thanks for joining us again.
Yeah.
Just want to ask you this one question. In 95, you took Eric Metcalf, Burt Emanuel, and Terrence Mathis. They became the third set trio teammates to go over 1,000 yards in the same season. How was it? I mean, coaching them three guys, what do you remember about them?
Well, I can remember they all were very intelligent players. And I'm going to add one to you. Burt Emanuel was 20 yards short of 1,000 yards. We would have had 4,000-yard receivers, which had never been done. And I don't think, I think Eric Metcalf was one of my favorite. I remember when he was coming out of Texas, I really, really wanted to draft him with our first pick. And I wanted to make him a slot receiver. And he said, no, I'm a running back. And at 5'9", 5'10", 180 pounds, I said, you're not going to last very long. Well, guess what? He went with Belichick in Cleveland, and they pounded him for 4 or 5 years. And when he became a free agent, I called him back. I said, Eric, you ready to play slot? He says, I'm ready to play slot. And so anyway, if I had him from the first time in the league, oh my gosh, his numbers would have been unbelievable, because he caught over 100 passes that first season for me. And he could run after the catch, of course, like nobody's business.
So, Coach, back in the mid-'80s, the SMU Mustangs, they received harsh sanctions known as the death penalty. We all know that story. That program was in misery for a couple of decades. Then you come in 2008, turn things around. The next year, the Mustangs win their first bowl game in 25 years. So, Coach, how were you able to turn that team around, and how would you describe your time at SMU?
Well, I love my time at SMU. It was, it was a time that they were trying to, get back on the map. And we went to 4 straight bowl games while I was there. And we were going through transition with the school. The standards of the student athletes coming in were not the standards of what was in the school. In fact, everybody in the school had perfect SAT scores. There was nobody that didn't have perfect. And so we're starting to bring in some kids that were, in the 800s and 900s, and we didn't have the wherewithal to help support them in their academics. So unfortunately, a lot of them flunked out, and I didn't. My time, and I think I'm most proud that I got the academic situation changed. We got student helpers, we got study hall, we did a bunch of different things to help the kids maintain. And I think that's why they're having some success now, is because those things have been set in place to help the student athlete.
Well, first of all, Coach, it's an honor to have an offensive mind like yourself. I'm so thrilled because I'm a play design gal.
All right.
I think a lot of problems with offenses I see is that we don't have those kinds of minds in the game anymore. Okay, I'm just going to leave it like that. My question to you, when you were coaching, did you design a system and then bring in the players that you thought were going to fit that system, or did you pick up the talent and then design the system around them?
Well, I was in a position, so wherever I went, didn't matter if it was college or didn't matter if it was the pros, they were the worst in the history of football. In other words, when we went to Hawaii, they'd lost for 2 straight years, 18 straight games. And so I had to adjust a little bit to the players that I had, because not like Dion did already, where he changed everybody. We couldn't do that in those days. We had to kind of adjust. But since they were everywhere, Atlanta, Detroit, Houston were at the low end of the NFL. When I got there, they were willing to listen to what I wanted. For example, I traded for Drew Hill at the Oilers, and he was a great receiver, one of the best receivers I ever had, and he just passed away a short time ago. But he was at the Rams, and so we traded for him because he fit. I always felt like he fit the slot for me. And then we drafted Ernie Gibbons. I don't know if you remember that name. In the second round, yeah, and he fit the slot. So I was able to kind of draft players, and one of the greatest wideouts, I have slots and wideouts that ever played for me, was we drafted out of the band at Northern Arizona, and he played in Atlanta. Gosh, my mind is shot right now. I'm trying to think who it was. Michael Michael's his first name, but you guys
Michael
probably.
Haynes?
Yeah, Michael Haynes.
Michael Haynes, yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Ran the fastest 40 at the combine. And I said, well, I need those kind of guys outside. So when they play bump and run, we can run by him. Well, Michael Haynes listen to this stat. That year that you were talking about, I was talking about 91, he caught 14 touchdown passes for me. Okay, 14 touchdowns. They averaged 44.3 yards per touchdown catch.
Unbelievable.
I mean, that's just, I guarantee that's never happened in the National Football League. I can remember we're playing the Redskins, and the great corner, Green, was playing in bump and run. And I knew they were going to blitz us down in the when we were coming out. And Michael, I said, just beat him on the slant. So Michael beat him on the slant, and they ran foot for 89 yards. And Michael and Daryl didn't catch him. And Daryl was the fastest player in the league, and so that just proved that Michael blew him out of the water.
So from 05 to 07, you have one of the finest starting college quarterbacks in college history, Colt Brennan, who 2006 throws for 58 touchdown passes, which at the time was a record. It stood for 15 years, I want to say all the way to 2019, I think. So that 15 years on that record, and over 5,500 yards, which I think is still in the top 10 there. So just tell us about that magical season and how Colt was able to just pull that off.
Yeah, well, we went because we're in Hawaii and because we played in a bowl game, we were able to play. I think we played. I don't know. I thought we were 12-3 that year, so we played 15 games, and Colt was phenomenal. And the next year we went undefeated, and Colt was equally phenomenal. But in that 06 season, I thought was his best. And in those 3 losses, we had the ball in our hand to go in to score the winning touchdown, which if we didn't that year. We only won one of those last drive. We lost those 3 games. He would have won 26 games in a row, which is incredible. I mean, especially when you're living by the past, which we were. And Colt made our receivers something special. It gets back to Peggy's comment. I was able to get, I looked for kind of Eric Metcalf type guys that were running backs to be my slots, because when we throw them short passes, I want them to be able to run like a running back. And so Devon Bess was one of my slots, and he was truly a great one for me. But Colt made all those guys better. He made our team obviously better, and it was a great run. And I'm sorry just as Colt had a long history of issues, and it's tragic that he's not here to remember all those with us.
Coach, I understand that charity is something that's very important to you. If the reports are correct, you donated your entire 2018 coaching salary to various charities in Ontario and Hawaii, and then you have the June Jones Foundation. So could you tell us a little more about that and what charity means to you?
Yeah, well, I think one of the reasons that I got so active in the foundation is because of Lee Steinberg. Lee Steinberg was my only agent that I ever had from 1977 on. I think I was his second next to Steve Barkowski, and the only reason is because we were living together. And I happened to meet Lee when Bart was number 1 pick. And so he stressed to all of us that it was important that we give back to those places that helped us, and that triggered me to help my colleges, Portland State and Hawaii, that helped me get to where I was, and then it just kind of kept growing, and I when I was at Hawaii, I went to American Samoa and Pongo Pongo, and I went down there for close to 12 years straight to hold a football camps we had kids coming barefoot. They didn't have football shoes. They didn't have anything down there, helmets, anything. So I was on a mission to basically clothe for the football programs in Pongo Pongo, and that was one of the most powerful things for me personally, that I felt like I was able to impact people's lives. And so that kind of is what triggered the giving part back, was Lee Steinberg, and then getting me to go to American Samoa, which Lee got me to do.
Peggy.
Well, I hate to, I don't want to blindside you, but I'm just dying to know if you had to pick 3 top offensive minds in the NFL history, who would your 3 heroes be?
Well, the ones that played for me, I think there's so many. There's a young kid that I'm sure you know of, that I just truly loved as a person, as a player. He's had a 10 or 12-year career now, and he's in Arizona. His name is Kelvin Beachum, and I can remember calling the Pittsburgh Steelers on draft day. Nobody thought he could play tackle, and I knew he could, because I had Bob Whitfield, which was the first player taken in the draft, and when I was in Atlanta. Then I knew that he compared to him as a tackle, pass blocking wise, and of course nobody believed me because they want tall, long arms, all that kind of stuff. But I knew, and so Kelvin has started for Pittsburgh when they drafted him. He started for him, and now he's been in Arizona, and he's been starting for them for quite some time now. So that's a name that probably you weren't not thinking I was going to mention, but the other guy, there's two guys, Chris Hinton. I'm sure you remember Chris Hinton. He came to us. He came to us in a trade from Indianapolis, and that was, I think, part of the Jeff George trade, actually. That when we took Jeff George, and he could do it all: run blocking, pass blocking, smart. He was one of a kind, special guy. The other guy that I played with that was probably as good a pass blocker as there was ever in the league is Mike Ken. And yeah, I don't know if he's in the Hall of Fame yet, but he should be. If he hasn't, he had a 17-year career. But I think those guys probably are the 3 that I've coached that I really think are special players.
Coach, thanks again. Now, 2010, SMU Mustangs. You know, we all know you for your run and shoot offense, putting yards up, but that year you had 1,000-yard running back, Zach Line. He rushed for 1,450 yards. What do you remember most about him? Because I mean, that guy had a lot of yards when you played.
Yeah, well, he was a. It's funny that you asked me that, because I think of him all the time. That people, you know, what I need as a running back in my offense is not what everybody else looks for. I look for a big guy that can block first, because I know he's going to get one-on-one a lot in pass protection. And then the second thing is can he run? Well, he was a linebacker. He was a linebacker coming out of high school. And so I said, okay, I saw how quick he was and how he moved. And I said, okay, that guy could be my running back. And so sure enough, he got his chance to do it. And he ended up playing in the league for, I think, 5 or 6 years with, I think, the Saints, but I'm not sure. And, you know, I'm going to get back to that other statement you made about the 3 1,000-yard receivers. Well, I took on a free agent because I thought he was the perfect back for me, for my offense, and we didn't get him. Ironhead.
Yes.
And he was taken in the first round by the Saints, and he played for him for 3 or 4 years. I think his most yards rushing was 300 one year he had, and he ate himself basically out of it.
Right here from Pitt. Right.
Okay, yeah.
Hey,
And so I called him during free agency, and I said, Ironhead, how much you weigh right now? He said, I weigh 360. I said, okay. I said, if you can lose 100 pounds, and this is like the 1st of May. If you can lose and come in and by the first game weigh 265, I'll put you in the Pro Bowl. And so he trusted me. He came. He weighed 260 by the first game. Now, just think of that. He lost 100 pounds. And the first game would be September, from May to September. And he rushed for 15, I want to say 14 or 1,500 yards for me and made the Pro Bowl.
Remember
And
that.
that would be the 4,000-yard player. And if my other wide receiver, Bert, had caught 20 more yards, we would have had 5,000-yard players in the same offense.
Magical team.
So we'll get you out of here with this. What can we expect from the 2024 Seattle Sea Dragons?
Well, I think they're going to be pretty good again. I am not going to go back this year to BOC. I talked him into hiring Nick Rolovich. Nick Rolovich was a head coach at Washington State, played for me, knows our offense. And so I thought that he would be a good fit, and they hired him. And so I think they're going to be pretty good. But, you know, the thing with the XFL now, my quarterback made the Denver Broncos roster. So unless they assign him back to the XFL, you know, you got to go find another guy. And, you know, I really like Ben DiNucci. He was real competitive. He kept getting better and better and better. And I kind of thought he would make the Bronco team. In fact, I talked to Sean Payton about him before they signed him. And so hopefully he'll get some time in it. You know, who knows? You know, they rotate quarterbacks now, and some of those down the line NFL teams, you may get a chance more than you ever did.
DiNucci went to my high school, Pine Richland. So
All right.
Yeah. Well, we want to thank you, Coach. Thank you so much for coming on. We appreciate you being here.
Coach.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for your questions, and a pleasure meeting you. And as we say in Hawaii, aloha.
Aloha. Make sure everybody's watching. Hit that like and subscribe button and that notification button. Thank you for watching, everybody. Have a great night.
Bye.